Afternoon, colleagues. Good to see you on this gloomy, wet Valentine's Day. Moving swiftly on. Can I start by welcoming everybody along to our Cabinet meeting today? This second meeting of 2024, our February Cabinet meeting. We'll start with item number 1 on the agenda today, which are apologies. We don't have any apologies on. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Yep. Thank you. We move to item number 3 then. These are the minutes from our January 2024 Cabinet, and these are available in pages 3 to 16 of your packs. All members have had an opportunity to consider these. Are members content that these are a true record?
Happy to move.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move to item number 4. This is the 2024-25 Capital Strategy and Treasury Management Strategy. And colleagues, this can be found on pages 17 to 76 of your report packs. The first report focuses on the Capital Treasury Management Strategy for 2024-25. And as you will be aware, this is an annual report which focuses on the Council's capital expenditure plans, the financial impact of those in terms of borrowing, and our investment strategy for the year. It's important to note that full Council ultimately approve the borrowing limits and prudential indicators contained within the report. However, we as a Cabinet are requested to approve the detailed capital programme itself and recommend the report to Council for approval. It's also important to note the Governance and Audit Committee have also considered the report in their most recent meeting and have endorsed the proposed strategies with no concerns raised. And I'd like to thank the Governance and Audit Committee for that consideration. Now, in terms of the report itself, there are a number of key points to draw Cabinet's attention to, and these are as follows. The 5-year capital programme is now managed on a rolling basis, meaning that a new year, 2028-29, has been added to the programme. The programme itself continues to reflect the challenging financial circumstances we're working within, and as such continues to compromise ongoing and previously approved schemes, as well as annual sums. These are the sums allocated for activities such as asset maintenance and fleet renewal. Now, although there are no new schemes being included, the programme, especially in 24-25, is still significant and contains a number of the Cabinet's highest priority schemes. For example, our new school projects, the Transporter Bridge, and new leisure and wellbeing provision. Because of the affordability challenges, there is no new borrowing headroom to be approved at this point. However, the programme does now include indicative new borrowing from 2027-28 onwards, which, if still affordable nearer the time, will be available to pursue new schemes, such as the next wave of school development projects under the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. Until the point at which that new borrowing can formally be approved, it means that capital headroom is limited to those amounts already held in specific earmarked reserves and uncommitted capital receipts. As a result, careful prioritisation will be required when making new commitments from the headroom, and every opportunity will be needed to take whatever opportunity we can to boost it via one-off sources, so that we can continue to respond to emerging pressures as and when they arise. Although there is no new borrowing included in the next few years of the programme, previously approved borrowing will be incurred over that time frame, and this will increase the overall capital financing requirement and the Council's level of debt. The borrowing limits proposed in the report take account of this and the revenue consequence of additional borrowing is already budgeted for, following the budget investment made in 21-22. Therefore, the programme proposed is affordable, prudent and sustainable, based on current information and assumptions. In terms of Treasury management, the report today details the Council's approach to borrowing and investing. It confirms that the Council will still pursue an internal borrowing strategy by using available cash resources to defer existing external borrowing for as long as possible, and will only undertake borrowing in advance of need where there is a clear financial rationale to do so. It's important to highlight the large refinancing requirement the Council has during 24-25, which will see a number of large loans repaid and new loans taken out in their place. The strategies before us today reflect a prudent assumption of the capital financing costs that this replacement borrowing will result in. For investing, the Council will continue to prioritise security, liquidity and yield in that order, and will strike an appropriate balance between risk and return. A minimum investment balance of £10 million is still required, which is currently being met via 3 covered bond investments, and will continue to be the case for the next few years. Now, colleagues, you will note that the Head of Finance commentary within the covering report directly addresses the question of affordability, prudence and sustainability, and confirms that the proposed strategy and programme meet all of those criteria. So I'd just like to pause at this point and invite any any comments from Cabinet. Would anyone like to comment on this particular item? No? Okay, thank you for your consideration of the item, colleagues, and on that basis, we're being asked to recommend to full Council for approval the capital strategy for 24-25 and the borrowing limits needed to deliver the proposed programme, the Treasury management strategy and the prudential indicators included within it, the investment strategy and the MRP policy for 24-25. We're asked to approve the detailed capital programme set out in Appendix 1, and also asked to note the increasing level of debt and its impact, the Head of Finance's recommendations on borrowing, and, colleagues, the endorsement from Governance and Audit Committee. Are colleagues content to approve those recommendations? Thank you very much for that. We'll now move to item number 5 on our agenda, the 2024-25 Budget and Medium-Term Financial Plan. And this can be found between pages 77 to 202 of the packs that you have before you today. The report details the budget. It sets out the consultation results on our draft budget, further developments in budget assumptions, and an update on the Council's core and specific grant funding. The report outlines the budget in hand that the Cabinet has to allocate it, and I will be updating that with the latest position today. I'll set out the Cabinet's use of the available funds in hand, and that will finalise the Cabinet's 2024-25 budget recommendation to Council, which will be considered on the 29th of February. Moving focus, colleagues, on the budget. As a Cabinet, we approved our draft budget on the 10th of January, and that has been subject to consultation, as the report outlines in section 4, both with existing internal groups such as scrutinies, schools forum, unions, and externally with the wider public. And I'll return to this point later. There have also been some significant developments in our core and specific grant for 24-25 and further updates to our budget assumptions. I'll deal with these first to bring us up to date. Firstly, the Cabinet have approved updates to existing and considered new budget pressures and savings, and these are shown in paragraph 1.3 on table 2 of our report. These include financial pressures and investments coming from the fire levy, the need to provide additional core funding to the housing service to allow the service to transform its approach to existing housing demands, an increase to the Council's revenue contingency budget, mitigated in part by additional efficiency savings from budget realignment in non-service budgets, and additional council tax income from premiums recently agreed. Now, colleagues, these agreed budget adjustments update the budget in hand to nearly £1.3 million, as Table 2 shows. Secondly, last week, the Welsh Government confirmed that it would be receiving an additional £25 million of consequential funding from the UK Government from their increased funding to councils in England, and that this would be allocated to Welsh councils in recognition of the significant pressures on budgets, particularly social care and schools. Now, we've received information over the last day or two on how this will be allocated to individual councils, and Newport will be receiving an additional RSG allocation of £755,000. And in addition to this, there will also be an increase in social care specific grant funding. This therefore increases the current budget in hand to just over £2 million. I'll list the Cabinet's investment in budgets from this after I've set out the context for our budget plans and the consultation. We set out some of the key budget assumptions in both our draft budget, and the report here summarises those again. Key issues that the Cabinet are mindful of in setting out its final recommendation includes demands on council services. These continue to increase, and significantly so in housing services and children's social care. Unfortunately, the impact left by the pandemic in 2020 and 2021 is still putting huge pressures on our most vulnerable families, individuals and communities. We can't and we won't ignore these. The increased resource capacity required to deal with increasing demand for services and support must also be acknowledged. We're a young and growing city. Our population has increased by almost 10% over the last 10 years. And so the demand for person-centred services, education and infrastructure has also increased. The Council has a vast amount of infrastructure and assets that it is responsible for, and that these are integral to the delivery of our services, such as our roads, pavements and buildings. We need to provide additional funding so that these can be maintained. Most of our services are provided by people, and most of these are living here in Newport. These can be the Council's own staff, but also those in the organisations that we use to provide a wide range of services, such as domiciliary care and others that support our city's most vulnerable families and individuals. We were pleased to see the recent increase in the national living wage, which recognised the cost increases over the last year. And this has, however, meant that we have high price and inflation increases to take account of. We're really proud that Newport is a living wage employer, and we're able to ensure the external organisations we work with pay at least this themselves too. Now, turning to the consultation, we received nearly 1,400 public responses to our draft budget, and the summary of these and the minutes of the meetings with scrutiny, the schools forum and unions are included in the papers in our packs. On those budget savings that we specifically consulted on, the consultation confirmed that virtually all of them met with majority or relatively high levels of support and agreement from the public. In line with the context outlined and the feedback received, the Cabinet have reviewed the draft budget and we have considered how to allocate the budget in hand. This will be distributed as follows. We will allocate much needed funding of £700,000 for our highways infrastructure and building maintenance at £500,000 and £200,000 respectively. We'll allocate £300,000 of additional funding for our schools. This will be specifically earmarked within the school's funding formula for supporting our children with additional learning needs. We'll allocate a further £160,000 to our social services safeguarding hub. This is a vital service which supports families in crisis and is under unsustainable ongoing pressure as more and more demand is made upon it. We'll also allocate £595,000 to make provision for additional long-term borrowing and support our capital programme costs. We will allocate a further £150,000 to the homelessness budget to assist with addressing the continued pressures being presented by the need for temporary accommodation. We will also allocate £145,000 to address the issues and impacts which are presented by specific grant reductions. These total £2,050,000. The overall budget, colleagues, now strikes a balance between increased funding and ongoing new savings, and will ensure that residents continue to pay one of the lowest rates of council tax across Wales and indeed the UK. It represents a relatively small increase of £1.50 to £2.01 per week for those houses in Newport's most common bandings. And the council tax reduction scheme is there to continue to support those households who are eligible for support with this. The funding increases and our decisions on budget investments will ensure that we increase school funding, both by investing more funds over and above cost inflation increases and by not making savings from schools' budgets. That we continue to support our most vulnerable families and individuals in our communities. We're investing nearly £5 million in our homelessness services, social care and additional learning needs budgets. Demand in these areas is increasing and we cannot and should not ignore this. We recognise the need for investment in our highway infrastructure and assets, which are needed for service delivery and used by all residents, including ourselves, across the city. Much more is needed, of course, but I'm pleased to say that we've been able to make useful inroads here for the year coming. At this stage, colleagues, I'd just like to pause and open for discussion and comments. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I feel it has to be noted that over the last 10 years, we've had to make more than £80 million of savings, reflecting the focus and priorities of a national government who've determinedly cut public sector funding whilst promoting their politics of austerity. And more recently, we've seen the consequences of Brexit, along with poor fiscal insight or understanding when Liz Truss crashed the economy, increasing national debt and impacting on already rising inflation. 14 years of Tory mismanagement and we have to deal with the consequences. We have long memories of setting challenging budgets and making difficult decisions, doing our utmost to protect those who are most vulnerable and in need. Those that this government, who've had little care thought of, whilst their fat cat mates continue to fill their pockets, benefiting from backhanders. We've reached a stage where efficiency savings alone will not balance the budget, and hence difficult decisions that need to be made regarding some of our frontline services. This is against a backdrop of ensuring salary increases are supported, and for myself in education, provision is made for increasing pupil numbers. We know finances will be more precarious next year as the Tory government set out a 2-year programme of flatline spend on public services that was agreed back in the autumn of 2022. It's wonderful news. On the backdrop of that, we've been given additional funding from Welsh Government. I very much welcome that we have additional funding of £300,000 going into education, specifically for our children with additional learning needs. It's an area of education which our head teachers have highlighted to us where funding is greatly needed. I'm really pleased we can support that. We've listened and we can ensure that provision is there. It's also against a backdrop of no cuts to education, the education budget. We're supporting those salary increases and we're supporting those increased pupil numbers. But as I said, these are difficult times. And for this reason, I support council tax increase of 8.5%. The reality of council tax increases is there's no level playing field across Wales. We will continue to have one of the lowest council tax bases in Wales. Comparatively, Blaen y Gwent is proposing an increase of 5% on what they already charge. If we were to propose an increase so that we match this, we would be suggesting a 32% increase. And that's shocking, 32%. And that's why this system needs a review. The reality is that our proposed council tax increase will still ensure that it's still affordable for our residents and that those who are in financial difficulty there's provision and support for the council tax reduction scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, Deputy Leader. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. To follow on from the Deputy Leader, I also support going out and keeping at 8.5% council tax premium. The Argus will print it in nice big black letters, 8.5, and frighten everyone to death, when the reality is it's between 150 and £2. And it absolutely drives hell into me the way they try to manipulate percentages to make it sound bigger than what it is. We're still in the lowest quartile of council tax right throughout Wales. For argument's sake, Blaen y Gwent's BAM D is going up to £1,920.83 a year. Ours is £1,497. There's a massive difference. And the Deputy Leader is right. You're looking at multiple percentage points for that to go up. We still provide over 800 services to the public. It's not all paid for via council tax, it's paid for via other things as well. We have cut, slashed and burned for the last 14 years of austerity, of cost of living, of everything else. And do you know what? Our staff get up day in, day out and come to work and try to find ingenious ways of making a pound stretch into £1.50. They also got to face these bills, the same as we got to face higher council tax bills, because guess what? We all pay it as well. Because some people think, if you're a councillor, you don't pay council tax. Yes, you do. Everybody does. So, for that, I agree. We keep it 8.5%. You are quite often saying, Leader, from the cradle to the grave. And if we're not propping up, we're supporting social services and education. I would suggest that's cradle to grave. And good for us.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Harvey. Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry for the coughing. Unfortunately, this room has given me a bit of back throat. There we are. Yeah, so I'd like to bring attention to a significant breadth of services exceeding 800 in number, as my colleague just said there, that our local authority does provide the residents of Newport. And it's imperative to recognise the indispensable role these services play in our community, even if they may overlook their significance until the need arises. The persistent challenges of inflation has impacted council finances, a trend that began, as my other colleague has noted, through austerity and the unfortunate Liz Truss budget. But throughout the year, our staff have demonstrated adaptability, exploring innovative approaches and increased efficiency in their work. And in fairness to the Welsh Government, they have endeavoured to support local authorities amid a reduced and challenging financial settlement from London. A comparison with authorities across the border reveals shared pressures abate with significantly harsher terms in their attempts to address these challenges. Recent struggles faced by councils such as homelessness, temporary accommodation and child social care placements have been less crippling in the Welsh context. Whilst we do confront these issues as a nation and as a local authority, our ability to address them is on a much stronger foundation. Notably, I'm pleased to hear that the Welsh Government will be providing financial support, safeguarding our authority from reductions, such as the workforce grants and support in terms of requirements surrounding the RIF. Within the proposed budget, it is crucial to underscore the financial support allocated to make us more resilient in our response to emergency placements, while the Department develops and implements its transformational plan. And you noted, Leader, about the safeguarding hub already and the importance of the work and challenges and the number of referrals that we see within it. And despite being a budget for the upcoming financial year, this administration is committed to financial responsibility, prudence in delivery, even when the initial outlook appeared bleaker. Our values centre around safeguarding education and social services from cuts wherever possible. This is clear within the proposals in front of us today. As a growing city, we face new challenges and pressures, of all which have been identified and addressed within the proposals. And in determining this year's council tax, our focus has been on protecting the most vulnerable and minimising the impact on residents in doing so. When considering the actual cost in pounds and pence, the adjustment is lower end compared to changes in other essential services. And we acknowledge the financial difficulties faced by residents and believe that the proposed change is minimal overall. And importantly, we maintain one of the lowest figures, as already stipulated, not just in Wales, but also within the United Kingdom. And furthermore, support is available for residents, and we encourage them to check and apply for assistance if they cannot afford this or need other assistance, as noted. As a local Labour administration, we have prioritised the protection of vulnerable residents, as noted. This commitment is evident in the positive feedback received from residents during our interactions with local councillors on the doors, phones and in our ward local meetings. Residents appreciated our understandings of the challenges that we face and our efforts that we are aiming to address them. And in conclusion, our administration has consistently demonstrated financial prudence and responsibility in delivering what I said at the beginning of my observation, in excess of 800 services. Each and every one of them seeing our dedicated staff continue to perform their part at the highest standard, together like a jigsaw puzzle, providing great initiatives, events and support to our residents and our city. Each piece of that puzzle working together to make the whole complete. And I'm sure all of you, my colleagues, will agree with me when I say that we extend our gratitude to them for their unwavering commitment to delivering the best services to our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I imagine there's going to be somewhat of a theme today, but as we will see, I think, over the coming weeks, no council is immune to the financial challenges that we face in this budget cycle. It's been said that if a council cannot thrive, our communities can't thrive. And this isn't a Newport issue or a Welsh issue even. This is a national issue. The reality is councils are facing a budget gap because the Tories in Westminster have failed. They've failed to control inflation, they've failed to control debt and energy costs. Prices have soared and our councils have come out of a pandemic into another round of austerity and a cost of living crisis caused by economic chaos in Westminster. But like austerity, the decisions to underfund councils is a choice. The Tories are being cynical. They see cutting public services as a way of paying for their mismanagement of the economy. They know councils will be left with little options. We have to if we have any chance of protecting the 800 services that we run here in Newport. And if we don't do that, the most vulnerable in our society will suffer. In social services, we face unprecedented challenges in meeting our statutory duties, yet our staff continue to meet those challenges, and I know they will welcome the additional investments in our safeguarding hub. In Newport, we have a council that, despite the financial challenges, we have prioritised our education and social services budgets so we can protect the most vulnerable in our city. And that's what the people want and expect from a Labour administration. Not one council wants to raise council taxes, but we have a duty to protect as much as we can of the public services, and especially our statutory services that people depend on. Whatever our situation today, we will all depend on those services tomorrow. Every month the Tories hold on is another month councils face catastrophe. We need a friend and ally in Westminster, someone who will value public service, not strip them bare to pay for their own failings. And Leader, while the challenges we face are unprecedented, we have met our legal obligation and we have focused on protecting our most vulnerable residents during the most challenging of economic climates. But we continue to transform our services and invest in our city and in our future. None of us want to be in this position, but I know that we are focused on protecting the services people depend on this city, and we will focus on keeping people safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Leader. I also approve this budget as well, and I think with the 8.5% it is right. What I'm really pleased of, though, is seeing 700,000 coming into my service area, split between both infrastructure assets and building assets. 500,000 into infrastructure assets is fantastic, but for the residents to understand that infrastructure currently sits at a £90.5 million backlog within our service area. And that is because we're not getting the money down from Westminster, and this administration are always ensuring that education and social care come first. So really, really welcome, as I said, that 500,000 into my service area. A couple of my other colleagues have mentioned our staff and other things and the 800 services that are provided for with council tax. And I'd just like to sort of point out that, again, my service area infrastructure, just as an out-of-hours call, I've had 784 out-of-hours calls to our service area since February to February this year. So that's over 2 a day. Obviously, maybe not stretched out by 2 a day, but, you know, a significant impact of what's going on with our staff and what the council tax is actually funding. But I absolutely approve this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Lacey. And I think that example really does help to illustrate the demand on our services across all of our services as well. So thank you very much for that. Councillor Forsey.
Thank you, Leader. At budget time, we tend to focus on the things that we cannot afford to do. And this is true. We're having to cut our cloth according to our means. This is not only sensible, reasonable and responsible thing to do, but a balanced budget is required by law. However, we should not lose focus on the many things that we are able to do. As well as the big items such as schools and social services, the Council continues to clean the streets, collect the rubbish and deliver hundreds of other services to residents. I would also like to mention our lovely parks and play areas. We have a programme to refurbish and replace many of our children's parks right across the city. While some of this work is supported by grant funding, it's important to note that these projects don't run themselves. It is our excellent staff who are engaging with residents, designing and planning and overseeing this work. We're also working towards the Council targets to be net zero carbon by 2030. We're decarbonising our buildings, installing solar panels and installing electric vehicle charging points. Again, this is supported by grant funding, but planning, organising and managing is done by our excellent staff. I support our budget, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Forsey. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. Really, I'm just going to be adding to what's been said, but I think it's important we speak. The budget is the right budget for Newport. We've listened to both the people, but also the professionals within this city, which I think is key. Social services, education, housing, homelessness, and I could add many, many more. are reflected in this budget. But it must be stated that nearly every council in the UK is in the same position, or in fact, as Councillor Hughes, possibly worse, has said. I can understand residents' concerns. We are also residents, as Councillor Harvey mentioned, we are also residents of Newport, so no decision is taken lightly. And the 8.5% council tax has been mentioned. As stated, in pounds and pence, that's an increase of around about £2 a week, an increase of around about £8 a month. We understand that it's still around about £8 a month which needs to be found. But take a moment to compare that to the following. Interest rates were 0.1% in 2021. Now they are 5%. That is an average income, or increase I should say, if you've come off a fixed rate mortgage of £475 a month. That's over £5,500 a year you have to find. That is because the UK government crashed the market. Now, if you feel I'm being unfair to the UK government, let's have a look at the gas and electricity bills. They've increased over £800 a year per household. £800 a year per household. Now, the UK government could have passed that on to the gas and electricity companies. In fact, the CEO of BP said that is what should have happened. But no, they decided we should pay for it. Even though BP made an £11 billion profit in 2023. And then you'll see today's headline, that inflation has stayed at 4%. I would stress that all that glitters isn't always gold. The Bank of England target is still 2%. Food bills are still rising. Remember, whilst your bills have been going up, the UK government decided to write off £8.7 billion. £8.7 billion in PPE. £8.7 billion wasted. Could you imagine if Newport just had a small fraction of that? A small fraction of that. Finally, I'd like to mention this quote from today's BBC News. We are not going to relieve the pressure on families until we hit the Bank of England target. Let me stress that again. We are not going to relieve the pressure on families until we hit the Bank of England target. That quote, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor. So, happy to waste £8.7 billion, happy not to charge the gas electricity companies, happy to increase mortgages, but not willing to ease the pressure on the normal working person. So yes, there is an increase, and yes, tough decisions have had to be made, but making these decisions can maintain the services you expect, the residents expect, and as you said, Leader, maintained by the people of Newport. So I support.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Clark. Would anybody like to add anything to that? Okay, so I'd like to thank you all, colleagues, for your very considered comments here today. And I'd also like to put on record my personal thanks to Cabinet and to the senior officer team here at Newport City Council for their hard work and their efforts to deliver a budget in the most difficult and challenging of times for the public sector. A budget which supports the continuation of service delivery for our growing city. Thanks also to all of our partners and stakeholders who've responded to the consultation on our proposals. Our Scrutiny Committee colleagues, the Schools Forum, our trade union sisters and brothers, and members of the public who've responded in writing or through online surveys or by attending our local ward meetings in their communities. I've been reflecting on the comments made by members of the public that have been balanced and fair, and would like to make reference to one such comment on council tax. One respondent stated, "I'm fine with the increase, but the money needs to go on services we actually use, such as improving roads." Colleagues, I hope that you will agree that the budget that we've agreed today is a budget which strikes that all-important balance for the citizens of Newport. Now, as we've discussed here today, over the last 10 years, we've been forced to take more than £80 million out of our budget as a city council. And this is forced upon us by the inequitable Barnett formula and the policy decisions of successive Conservative governments determined to undermine public services. We welcome the support the Welsh Government have been able to give us in this very difficult situation, and we recognise the challenging financial situation that the Welsh Government face as well. Colleagues all across the UK, across all of our communities, people are fighting for survival. Local government is fighting for survival. Our public services are fighting for survival. And as the finance settlement from the Conservative UK government firmly shows, the only survival that the UK government is interested in is its own. So, colleagues, as noted in the report, we're asked to consider and approve the following as our final budget proposals and recommendation to Council for the financial year 2024-25. The budget investments and savings included in Appendix 6 and 7 of the report respectively, a council tax increase of 8.5%, the proposed fees and charges in Appendix 12 of the report. Are colleagues content to support those recommendations? Yep. Okay. Thank you all very much for that. I'd like to thank you for your considered comments and contribution to our debate on that. And once again, thank you to all of our officers who've been involved in supporting this process. We move to item number 6 on our agenda today, which is our Newport City Council Social Value Outcomes in Procurement Update Report. And this can be found on pages 203 to 214 of your packs. I do have an introduction, but I just cannot withhold my absolute delight of being able to bring this report to you so that you can see for yourselves the tremendous impact that this has seen. And brilliant. A huge thanks to the team for delivering on this. This really does show the total benefit of the multiplier effect of public sector investment. And we should, whilst we've had some really difficult and challenging conversations today, we should take absolute delight in looking at the evidence base which really strongly demonstrates what can be gained from public sector investment through procurement. So huge thank you to the team for this. So this report is our first report of the outcomes delivered from using the Newport Social Value Measurement tool known as the Newport TOMS, which we adopted as a Cabinet in March 2023. The TOMS, meaning Themes, Outcomes and Measures, are a mechanism for reporting on social value delivery through our procurement of goods, works and services. And the purpose of this report is to highlight the achievements made for the first 6 months reporting period between May to October 2023. Now, the Newport TOMS were developed from the overarching Welsh TOMS framework, which is designed around the 7 wellbeing goals from the Wellbeing of Future Generations legislation. The methodology was developed in conjunction with the WLGA National Procurement Network and the National Social Value Task Force Wales, which is a cross-sector working group combining both public and private sector organisations. Many of the measures within the framework have a value assigned to them, which is representative of the monetary value that the measure brings in added social value. And these are used consistently across Wales, as you'll be aware. When the Council is procuring goods and services through long-term contracts, we identify the measures that are applicable to those areas and the companies that deliver these. These are included in our tendering processes, whereby they identify what they will deliver against these measures. For example, the number of new jobs or apprenticeships created. These are an integral part of the tender submissions, which are then scored in conjunction with other quality and price criteria. Colleagues, for this first reporting period, from May to October 23, a total of £991,984 worth of social value was delivered through tenders undertaken during this time. Almost £1 million of social value. This is the value of the public sector. This is the value of public sector investment. Now, a large proportion of this total is made up of employees hired or retrained to work on the contract that live within the boundary of the City of Newport. And this added social value for local employees represents some 890,000 of the total achieved. Not only this, colleagues, another highlight from the report is that all of the contracts measured demonstrate that the staff engaged on the contract are paid at least the real living wage foundation rate as opposed to the basic national minimum wage. Not only are we ensuring that our citizens are in receipt of the living wage, we are keeping that Newport pound going round and round in our city. And you should all be incredibly proud of the achievements that we've made through this. This is absolutely the future for public sector procurement. So I'll just pause for any contributions anyone might like to make. Deputy Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. £1 million of social value in 6 months. That's absolutely outstanding. But I think it's a measure that we're now using, but I think we also need to reflect that all our officers have been working hard to put that additional social value into what they do for many, many, many years. This is about public sector working for the community. This is about people working for Newport. And it's absolutely brilliant that we can actually formally measure it by actually putting figures against it to prove that there is value in what our officers do. So this is a recognition of the work that's happening, but it's also a big thank you, because we can actually say, wow, this is what they're delivering and what we're achieving. And, that we're actually, we can actually give evidence that we're actually ensuring that our residents who work for Newport City Council are actually employed and are paid the living wage. And we can stand up and be proud of that. This is a fantastic report, and I look forward to seeing what comes forward in 6 months' time. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I think we'll all remember your enthusiasm for this policy a year ago. I'm glad to see nothing much has changed. But I'm pleased, because it's about common values for us all, I think. I think we all share that passion that you have and understood where we were trying to get to. And I'm really pleased to see that the update confirms that you can make a strong financial decision while still prioritising the Council's commitments to our social, to our cultural, to our economic and to our environmental values, and that we all share that. It remains important that we acknowledge social value and well-being and use procurement to support our objectives, and I'm pleased to note the successes through the first year. So maybe there's a message here for Westminster, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that with principles, values and prioritising of people, we can have and introduce financial benefits that improve the well-being of our people in our city. So I'm really happy about the report. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. Thank you. Any further? Councillor Forsey.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to briefly reflect on the excellent work and the outcomes in this report. And using council spending to benefit the local area and the local people has always seemed like a good idea intuitively. But now we have a protocol to be able to carry this out objectively. The report shows the work we have done as a council to deliver social value to our local community through our procurement and contracting activities. And the report shows the total social value achieved, as somebody mentioned just now, I think 1.8 million worth of social value delivered to our community. This is an increase of 28% from the previous 6-month period and exceeds our target. So I'm just really pleased to see how this is progressing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fawsey. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. Reading through, this has covered everything. Grassroots sports, food banks, charities, supporting them, promoting them. It's just phenomenal. And now I get why you were so keen for this to go ahead. My God, it's paid off in spades. So well done for you and well done to our guys. It's brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any further comments on the report? No? Well, I think I'd just like to say once again, colleagues, that huge thanks to the officer team for taking this forward and for putting up with me. Thanks, Rich. So a huge thank you to the officer team for taking this forward, and it's really positive to be building up that evidence base that really demonstrates what public sector procurement can do for our citizens. So thank you everybody for this, and it really does demonstrate that our contracts can bring that wider community value and demonstrates our commitment to the well-being of our future generations. So thank you all for your contributions to that, and thanks once again for the office team for their hard work. Thank you. We move to item number 7 on our agenda today, and this is our external pressures cost of living report, and this can be found on pages 215 to 220 of your packs. Now, this is the last report on our agenda today and is an update on the external pressures impacting the delivery of council services and provides a summary of the council's response to these pressures. And as you'll all be aware, we've asked for this to be a standing item on our agenda because it is important and we do need to be aware of not just the impacts of the challenges that people are facing all across our city, but also the outstanding response to it from across our service areas. And we know that the main challenges facing Newport are the cost of living crisis, pressures on housing and homelessness services, and changes in the asylum process. The Council is responding to these challenges through collaboration and partnership working to provide support, advice and guidance to residents. The report provides examples of activities and support offered during this period, including targeted support within temporary accommodation hostels, providing warm snacks to young people, facilitating sessions for families in debt, and distributing food packs to those in need. The Council is also working closely with partners to coordinate support over the next few months. I'd like to take this opportunity to urge our residents who are experiencing difficulties to contact the Council for information and signposting on the advice and support available, in person, by phone, or by visiting our support and advice pages on the website. Over the coming months, our officers will be promoting the facility to choose how to spread council tax bills as a way of supporting our residents with lowering their monthly outgoings. Residents will be able to choose the plan that best fits their individual circumstances within 3, 6, 10 and 12 monthly plans available. It's also encouraging to see the number of partnership events and activities across the city during the last period, and to see planning for events and roadshows ongoing. Now, colleagues will also be aware of how shared prosperity funding has been secured to support the delivery of warm spaces during winter months. And this funding will provide small grants directly to our third sector organisations supported by GAVO. Now, as leader of the Council and chair of One Newport, I continue to advocate for partnership working as being vital in supporting our residents and businesses, and would like once again to encourage anybody in need to access the support available. And at that point, colleagues, I'll pause for any contributions that you may like to make. Councillor Harvey.
In the report, under the warm spaces, in this document it says 16 services have been... Well, I have an update. There's actually 25 warm hubs for people to go to, and this last month we have invited and welcomed over 3,000 residents to come into one of our warm spaces, cup of tea, coffee, whatever they want. Mostly, a lot of them is just company. And as you know, that can be priceless for some people. So hats off to them and hats off to the staff. It's a fantastic initiative and I'm really proud to be able to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, and thank you for the all-important role you play within that, within your portfolio. Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just a quick one of the fantastic appreciation of events happening in the city during this half-term week, a lot of them obviously free. Starting off with the Chinese New Year, which was really good, and might I say the Year of the Dragon, so it's a good year, hopefully for me as a Year of the Dragon myself. You know, a bit of raw, but there we are. But also, you know, the things that we've seen recently about young people becoming independent, about the care leavers, blankets made with love, as we've seen, you know, prior to council last time. But just going back again, just to remind people that, you know, there's always spaces that they can go to. I know my colleagues mentioned, you know, about the kind of warm spaces, but also the community connector mornings, coffee mornings and things like that there. There's a whole range of things to be signposted to, come and have a coffee, you know, have that connection, and just to make sure that you have that bit of company and that you're not lonely at home. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Marshall. And it was wonderful, wasn't it, to see so many people and so many families particularly enjoying themselves in the city on Saturday. It was wonderful. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. School anti-poverty roadshows. Quite honestly, 10 years ago, would we have believed such a thing would exist? Would we believe that our schools would need to provide that level of support for our parents to ensure that they can put food on their table, that they can provide school uniform for their children, and that also that they get support within the school, within these roadshows, to be taught how to access housing benefits? Because you didn't need to do that 10 years ago. But yet again, our national government is putting our families in a position where they are really struggling. So I very much welcome that our officers are working together as teams, and they're going into our local communities, they're working within our schools to support our families, and very specifically ensuring our families know what grants and what facilities and what are available to them. It's making a massive difference, and I'm really, really grateful. But can you believe it? 10 years ago, we couldn't envisage this happening. But again, our officers are going over and above to deliver. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Deputy Leader. And it's a very sombre reflection for us all, really, to see how society has been impacted by this. And huge thanks to all of our officers that undertake this work for the benefit of our citizens across Newport. So thank you for that. Any further comments on this item? Colleagues content to note the report? Okay, thank you. The final item on our agenda then today is the work programme, and this is on pages 221 to 228 of your packs. Are you happy to move acceptance of the updated programme? Okay. Thank you very much for that, colleagues. I'd like to thank you all for your considered and thoughtful contributions today, and for the work that you do on behalf of the citizens of Newport. And once again, our thanks as a Cabinet to all of our officers who continue to work for the best for our citizens every single day. So thank you, everybody.